Every week, every day in fact, my clients ask me brilliant questions about business English. Today, I'm sharing with you a few of my favourite observations from my coaching sessions over the past few weeks that I think will help you feel more confident. Let's crack on. Hello and welcome back to Confident Business English. If you're a senior manager and you already have to use English at work, but you'd really like to build your confidence, you are in exactly the right place. My name is Anna. I'm a neurolanguage coach, and for the last 8 years, I've been helping professionals communicate more confidently in English. Just before we dive in, it's really important to recognise that this is the final episode of this season of the podcast. If you've been here since September 2025 and you have listened every week until now, that is over 40 episodes, which is actually over 11 hours that you have spent with me. My goodness. Thank you so much, of course. It's been an absolute pleasure to accompany you, whether you have been in the car on the way to and from work, perhaps you've been in the gym on a dog walk or ironing. It really has been great, and I hope that you have found these episodes useful. Don't worry, though, the podcast isn't disappearing over August. Every Wednesday, there will be an episode published for you. I'm going to be answering some of your questions, sharing some of the key takeaways from recordings and live streams that I did, and also reposting some of the most popular episodes. Most importantly, the new season is going to be back on the 16th of September. I just had to triple check that there. Yes, Wednesday the 16th of September, I will be back with a new season. Now, moving on to the episode for today. As you already know, if you've been listening, I spend my whole week coaching senior managers from all over the place, whether it's Europe, the US, Asia. Something I often do is write down little observations, whether it's a phrase, a question that comes up all the time, or just something that I think I'd really love to share that with you on the podcast, because I think it can help you resolve a doubt very quickly and help you feel more confident when you are out there in the real world. That is what we are all about after all. Let's have a look at the first topic on the list. And here we're actually going to talk about professional etiquette, which is not something that I've really touched on in the podcast, but I thought it was a really, really interesting point that came up in a client session. And I thought actually covering this might help you feel more confident when you have these types of social face-to-face interactions. The question was this. They have to work with people in the UK, and they went to a meeting with some people that they already work with, right? They'd had online meetings, and then they went to meet them face to face. And they said, when I went there, we hugged. It's my team, and we hugged, and it was fine and whatever. It wasn't awkward or anything like that. But the question was, okay, when I work with British people in the future, and these are people that I work with and I know, should I initiate a hug? Should I go in with the handshake? What's the appropriate professional etiquette in British working culture? What I advised this person to do, and the conclusion that we came to was, lead with the handshake, and if the other person initiates the hug, great, rather than leading with the hug and then having that awkward moment where they perhaps feel uncomfortable and you're like, oh my goodness, I've invaded their space. What do I do now? And then that could kind of be a little bit of an uncomfortable moment between the two of you. Lead with the handshake. And if they sort of say, oh no, and they initiate the hug and you feel comfortable, of course, then you can go with that. Of course, we need to make sure that we apply some common sense. I do not represent everybody in the UK. There's lots of different types of personalities and cultures. But I hope that perhaps that reflection helps you feel a little bit more comfortable if you have to take on a face-to-face or in-person interaction with a UK colleague. All right, let's move on to the next point. This is actually not a question, but it was something that came up in one of my recent client sessions. And I thought, you know what? I really want to double check that you know the difference between these two when giving recommendations, because there's two structures that we can use here, one that's really common and one that's less common. And there is really a nuance between them that I want to go through with you. Very briefly, a little bit of context. I'm working with one of my clients on improving their diplomatic skills in English. You may relate to this, but in their native language, which is Czech, it's very much straight down the line. It's direct. We get to the point. always being polite, of course, but what that means is they're not very used to using some of the diplomatic techniques that we have in English, like hedging phrases or modality, for example. One of the areas we were looking at was recommendations. And two structures came up, which is we should do this and we ought to do this. The question I posed to them was, what's the difference between the two? So what is the difference between the two? We should go with this option, for example, and we really ought to find out what our employees think. What's the difference? Perhaps it's to do with tone. They're both recommendations. Here's the thing. Should, as you can probably tell and know, is much more common. This is your go-to. It's your classic. We use it all the time. We should do this. We shouldn't do that. And it's for a general business action. Ought, on the other hand, is also a recommendation, but it's really about saying this is the right thing to do. And when we talk about this in a business context, this is because it's something that aligns with our values, for example. Or, just as human beings, this is what we ought to do. We really ought to speak to our employees because they are the people that know best and they are the engine of the business. We really ought to get their feedback. So if you hear that in a meeting, I hope that helps you feel more confident about what's the real nuance between them. Why is somebody using should, just a general business action, very common, use it all the time as a recommendation, and ought. To help you feel more confident with the pronunciation as well, because maybe you're thinking, oh, I'd really like to try and use that word. Yes, but if you look at it, it really doesn't help you at all because it's O-U-G-H-T. I'm going to direct you to that group of irregular verbs in the past tense to get the sound. So it's the same sound as we would have in things like taught, caught, brought, fought, ought. We really ought to find out what our customers are saying. Next, let's follow with another pronunciation point. And I had to talk to you about this because I thought this is absolutely something that could happen to you as well. One of my clients sent me a message on WhatsApp and they said, look, I've got a meeting tomorrow and I don't know how to pronounce the name of the person that I'm meeting. I was like, okay, what's the name? The name was this. And I'm going to spell it for you, right? Keith. Let me repeat that. Keith. They were like, look, don't know how to pronounce it. And I thought, right, I'm going to send them a voice note with this pronunciation. Just thinking about it now, how would you pronounce that name if you just saw it for the first time? Perhaps you already know, but if you don't, there could be all kind of options, right, that could come up here. It could be Keith, Kieth, Keith. Spanish speakers, for example, and probably Portuguese speakers too, you'd probably break it into two syllables. However, this name, which is very common for men in the UK, is actually pronounced like this. Keith. Keith. So if you have a colleague and they pop up and they've got that name, now you can feel confident that you know how to pronounce it. Here's a little trick as well to help you remember. Keith has teeth. Keith has teeth. Even though it's a slightly different spelling, it's the same sound in the middle. Keith has teeth. We hope. I mean, perhaps not. Perhaps Keith has dentures, but for the purposes of this exercise, Keith has teeth. Last but not least, we're going to just finish off this Anna's Key Takeaways episode with a quick fire round. These are some questions that have been sent in to me. I'm going to start with the first one here, which is from Veronica, and she is a key account manager in Italy. And the expression that she wanted me to talk about here was to wrap up. You might have had this question as well. Like, when do I use wrap up? Is it the same as saying to conclude? Yes, it is, essentially. We're wrapping up. Okay, and I kind of do this action like a tornado, right? It's like we're wrapping things up. And originally, by the way, it comes from this idea of like wrapping a present, like I'm wrapping it up for you, there you go. And that's kind of like what we're doing. We're wrapping up the meeting. Okay, we're packaging it all up, great, and we're finishing it and it's done. We use it in presentations at the end to wrap up, and then you make your conclusion, and also at the end of meetings. Let's wrap up. But it would sound a little bit out of context, for example, if you were on a phone call and you were like, let's wrap it up, especially if it was like one-on-one. It tends to be if there's something in a group. Does that make sense? Or if you were talking about your day and you were saying, okay, I'm just wrapping up my day, that would sound a little odd, but understandable. Equally, if you said, I'm just wrapping up the report, it's finishing a presentation or a meeting, but not necessarily a task. Does that make sense? Finally, another business expression was sent in by Roberto, who is a channel manager in an international visual technology company. Sounds fancy. You asked me about the expression hands-on. And I'm assuming that what you mean here is to be hands-on. This is expression generally when we want to describe, for example, a leader. If somebody's very hands-on, they are involved. It could have a negative connotation, but also a positive one. Hands-on meaning, you are in touch with the team. You know what's going on. You're involved. But it could also be negative, right? You're too hands-on. You need to take a step back. But generally what it's getting across here is a close involvement, and it's a way to describe a type of leadership style, to be very hands-on. Could be positive or negative. All right, let's wrap up this final episode of this season. I'm using wrap up here because it's kind of like a mini presentation, right? So we're wrapping up and we're finishing. It's been an absolute pleasure to accompany you over the last 11 months. I really hope that these episodes have helped you feel more confident, even if it's just one little thing that you've taken away or you've actually tried to implement everything that you've heard on here. Whatever it is, I really hope that they have helped you. The podcast will be back with the new season on Wednesday, the 16th of September 2026. Really looking forward to it. In between now and then, I'm going to be publishing every Wednesday as normal, so look out for that, or just catch up on the episodes that you've missed. Thanks again. Take care. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.